And there we go. That should all be good. And I go back into this page and then I see you and you can hear me, right, Joe?
I can hear you fine.
Yippee-yi-yay. Hey, everyone. It's Richard from BTFI. It's 8 o'clock on Monday. It comes around again every single week. It's predictable. So you'll see it's not just me tonight. Again, another two-hander. And she's got two hands as well. This is the lovely Joe Rogers that you're going to hear from in a moment. Hi, Joe.
Hi, Richard. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much. It's
you
great.
Hear me okay?
Yeah,
good.
I can hear you well. It's good to have you with us. Thank you for joining us direct from the Institute of Directors in London, beamed all the way in to Surbiton.
They've kind of losing their reputation with the internet, aren't they? So if we're
gonna do fingers crossed for great.
Do the best we can.
So I hope you've had a great Monday, everyone. Mine has been working from home all day today. I've been on calls, coaching, some meetings, and I realized that everyone I've spoken to today is a real provocateur, actually, in whatever space they're in, whether some are in a marketing space. One is a VP for a global food brand, just all very provocative in the way they are not just poking their teams, but poking their industry and really spinning the lens on how people are thinking differently and tackling their own businesses differently. And I do like that on a Facebook Live when we have someone on, that is also jolting their industry. And what I'm really clear on tonight is that in Joe, we have someone that is also doing that. So she's going to tell you a bit about why she does it, how she does it, and the kind of things she's doing at the moment. And I know that some of you you'll be going through your feed and you'll go, ooh, no, they're talking about legal things. So I'm not going to hang around and watch that one. And actually, I kind of get that, right? We had, some of you will have seen, we had Tina Weeks on a few weeks ago talking about finance. And we talked about head in the sand mentality where people just kind of ignore it and they kind of will deal with it when it's a problem. And in some ways, I think this whole legal space, and I know we're not talking about law as such tonight, are we, Joe? We're talking about much broader than that, about reputation and risk and how you manage risk and what that means for you as a business owner. But I think that's another topic where people just kind of look away and go, oh, when it's an issue, I'll deal with it. I don't understand it. It's too complicated. It means I have to spend thousands of pounds on buying someone's brain to tell me how to do it. So I'll wait for it to get a bit ugly. And I think we're going to explode some of those myths and ideas for you guys tonight about how you get back to, as we talk about in everything for the BTFI group and our tribe, is about getting in the driving seat. So you are controlling it and owning the choices, and you are able to peer around corners and are really making decisions in advance and not on the back foot. So without further ado, it's another one of those moments where people go, oh God, just let the other person speak. So I'm going to let the other person speak. So hello, Joe. It would be great. Why don't you tell everyone that's watching a bit about you and why you're here and why you set up Navstar Legal. Tell us.
Sure. Thank you for having me. And I love that you've got a tribe like in this community and this Facebook group. It's so much aligned to my ethos. And I'll tell you about that a bit later on. But my background was I set up started life as I didn't start my life as a lawyer.
That would have been
I wasn't born a lawyer. I started my career as a lawyer. And really, truthfully, I started becoming a lawyer because I looked at all of the things I could do, like a list of all the potential professions. And I was like, oh, which one has the highest prestige, the most amount of power and the most amount of money? And, truthfully, that's how I chose to do law. And so, yeah, it's been a journey. So I picked it for what at the time were completely the right reasons for me. But I started in the city, worked in the city for a number of years. And it was only when I left working for the city that I realized how utterly miserable I'd been. and how misaligned I was to the work that I was doing, but really enjoyed some aspects of it. So I love the transaction, I love the adrenaline. But that's just my personal side of things. I could also see there were a lot that could be changed in the legal profession, and fancy myself as a bit of a business owner, a bit of a maverick. I could make changes. So I set up my own company, actually supported with some amazing people. So I was working American Express at the time, and one of the guys there said, "Hey, look, we've got a client that you could work with," and he supported me to set up on my own. I'm not going to go too much into the background, but started as a consultancy. I call that Navistar version 1.0. Then we moved on to little bit, consultants here and there. That's version 2.0. And we're actually now on version 3.0, which is now growing as a business. And so I'm the founder of Navistar Legal 3.0, the third iteration.
Yeah, good thing. What's next?
The third
what's four?
3.0, we just go through the versions now. 3.1, 3.2.
Oh, okay. Got it. Yeah.
I think we've cracked what we wanted to do. But even back then, I met a guy called Mike Harris who set up Egg on First Direct, and he had a different take on. I knew I wanted to do something different in the legal profession. I just couldn't quite articulate what it was, and he's helped me through these iterations to get to where we are now.
So where are you now in terms of? Tell us what makes you stand out and do what you do differently, because I think we have views, don't we, of most professions, and legal is another one that we have views of all a bit dusty, all a bit antiquated, charge you for every second, going to cost a fortune, and it just feels a bit. It's much of it still feels quite stuffy and clunky and traditional and full of heritage and legacy behaviours. And so, how are you doing it differently?
Well, that really comes down to, and this is why I love the tribe element, because what I wanted to create was this tribe, or is this tribe of what I call next generation lawyers. So a group of lawyers that think a little bit differently. And my transition, my journey has been thinking like a lawyer to thinking like a business owner. And that's not an easy change. In fact, it's 180 degree. I mean, I do that deliberately. It's 180 degree change in my mind. I probably thought, I don't know if you've ever thought this, but you kind of in one position and you think, oh, I could do that. That would be easy. Like I'm in this corporate world, and of course I'm dealing with big businesses. So I'm like, of course I could set up a business. Oh my God, if I set it up. And usually what happens is you look to The Apprentice, or you look to a show and you're like, oh my God, what it is. I could do so much better. And then you actually get the courage to go and do it. And you go, oh, this is harder than it seems. And so for me, making it purposeful was about having a vision that was bigger myself, bigger, less about profit, less about prestige, less about how much money that I could get and become this billionaire. And it became more about, Mike talks about a purpose beyond money. It's not just his concept; it's a concept that a lot of business owners, and particularly leadership. I mean, Richard Branson talks about it all the time. This purpose beyond money, something bigger than yourself. And mine is this tribe of next generation lawyers that provides affordable legal wisdom to small and medium-sized businesses. That's where I'm headed.
And tell me, what was the tip? This is curious. This wasn't in the questions that I thought we'd talk about. But what was the tipping point for you to go that other thing? Because you said you'd kind of got this idea that you wanted to set out on this thing that would make you money, and there must have been a point where you thought, actually, it isn't about that. It's about something different. What was that? What happened? Well,
the first thing that happened was actually working with Mike. So that was a definite trigger. But within a year of working with Mike, so Mike set up First Direct and he set up Egg, and I give him massive credit because he's not he's a very corporate guy. He's very able to deal in the corporate space, but he's got a different mindset. And so first of all, it was meeting with him and realizing, he asked me the question when I met him, which was, what is it that you love to do? And I don't know what I answered at the time. It was a load of garbled rubbish because I was just so in awe of him. But that question triggered a lot. It planted a seed in me. But then about 2 years later, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and that really had an impact. There were about 10 days, and it's not serious, and I'm and I'm fine, and certainly so I'm 3 years clear, so it hasn't had a marked effect on me health-wise now. But at that time I had 10 days where I thought I was going to die. I mean, your mind goes completely crazy when someone says prepare for the worst, and you're like, oh my god, I'm going to die. And that had a huge impact on had a huge impact on me, and suddenly got me realizing that version 2.0, whatever I'd got to at that point, was also not it, that I was running myself into the ground, that I was not doing things in a sustainable way or for sustainable reasons, and had the effect of switching my mindset 180 degrees.
Well, it's and whenever we talk about something like that, where there's such a big life-changing event, or actually whether it's our own or whether it's that of someone that's close to us, it's how often it takes that stuff, the universe, to kind of step in and go, well, if you're not going to make a change, I'll make a change for you. We'll talk about, jolt or be jolted. It's like, if you don't do it, it will appear at some point until you get the learning, and often comes in ways that we don't want.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what's interesting? When you've experienced that, what you realize is allowing other people to experience that becomes the reason why you do what you do. So allowing them not to be, and jolt is a great word, allowing them not to be jolted in a way that they've got a safety net there, or jolted in a way that is a mild electric shock and not something that makes you convulse. Learning from that initial jolt rather than having to be jolted over and over and over again, because I mean, I am somebody that can take those shocks. I don't need to go through that again.
No, sure, you got the learning ticked.
Tick.
So look, go on, and I could ask you 1,000 questions. So tell me, why do you think there are a ton of business owners that just overlook this whole area of managing risk, managing their reputation, managing the more legal end of being a business owner? Why do you think that is?
You know what? And of course I'm a lawyer, but I'm also a business owner. So I'm kind of, I am my customer at the same time as being the supplier. I know what it's like to have 1,000 things going on at once, number one. But also because a lot of people tell you what you should do. Like, there's a lot of shoulds out there. You should do this and you should do that. And oh my God, I tell you, the one thing that people are at the moment panicking about, GDPR, oh my God, you should double opt in. There's a lot of scaremongering, and I get why. I say scaremongering. It probably isn't intended to be that. It's probably just intended to be marketing, but there's a lot of fear-driven, should, you should do this. Now, what a lot of people are doing, and I'm just gonna backtrack a little bit. I consider everybody's journey in business has to be really specific to them. So if I look to one of my clients versus another, they've got very different attitudes to risk. And that is very personal to them. So I have people that are in the property, and in fact, no, I was telling the story earlier about a client who was like, I want to buy 6 businesses. I don't want any to take longer than 3 weeks. And these are the only issues that I care about. Well, that is somebody who is quite happy taking risks. He may have the experience to be able to do that, but he's quite happy taking risks. On the other hand, I have people who say, I want everything structured. I want it watertight. It's another question whether you can get anything watertight. I want it. So there's a low attitude to risk. And I call these guys the number ones. And then there's a scale up to number 16. And you, as a business owner, have to know where you fit in that scale. There's no point. For example, now, when I worked in the city, I was the number one. I had a job. My investments consisted of an ISA, maybe. My money was predominantly in the bank, and I had a very low tolerance for risk. So unless I read everything and understood everything, I wasn't going to take action. On the other hand, we have 16s where they go, oh, we're going for it. Oh, I signed that agreement. Oh, no, I didn't bother putting that in writing. Oh, I know it's a multi-million-pound deal, but don't worry. People on the other end of the scale who are 16s. And it would be a question that I'd ask your audience today. Where, gut feel, on a scale of 1 to 16, don't think too much about it. Where are you on a scale of 1 to 16? Because that will determine how much is important for you to structure, to organize. And it will also give you a sense of when people tell you should do this and you must do this. Actually, you say to yourself, well, actually, you know what? I'm a 10 risk scale. I'm willing to pay for it later. And here is the other point, and this is another distinction. You will always pay for risk. So if you want to mitigate risk, either now or later, you're going to pay for it. You can pay with insurance, so that means you pay now, or if this is the risk, you bring the risk down, but you're always going to have to pay to bring that risk down. Some people like to mitigate or reduce the risk right the way down. That's going to cost you a lot up front, but you can kind of go somewhere in between. And this is what I find with people. The ones, they like to pay up front. The 16s, they're happy to pay later, but you will pay. And therefore, I'm a 6. I'm somewhere between a 6 and 8. I like enough knowledge to keep me comfortable, but I like to move. I like to move at a relative pace. So 6 to 8 is about right for me. So I guess the question is, why is it overlooked? Often they think it's going to cost them too much. Often there are too many shoulds. There are too many musts. This is what you must do. And actually, it's not personalized, and people aren't thinking about their own business and how it actually works for them. So yeah, those are the reasons.
So I think there's a bit, we often talk about, choices and consequences, and that's kind of what you're talking about now, that for every choice we make, there is a consequence. So not doing it, potentially there's a consequence. There's a consequence for going, I'll insure myself up to the eyeballs and you're going to pay now, and it might protect you at some point. And do you think there's any kind of an optimum point for someone that's setting up a business that has a big dream and wants to trailblaze and kind of carve their space out? Do you think there's an optimum on that scale?
Yes, I do. And I think it really comes down to where you sit on that scale, number one. Number two, it comes down to budget. If you're well-funded, you have to protect those assets. And also it comes down to responsibility. So if you are willing to hold your hands up later and go, oh, I'm sorry, guys, I screwed up. I didn't fix the contract in place. I know you were expecting me to do that. Then you have to be willing to take that on as responsibility. So yeah, there's an optimum. It is so personal. Number one, we'll make sure every I is dotted and every T is crossed. If you're a number 16, anything will be too much for you. So I think coming somewhere in the middle where you say, for example, I'll share with you actually some common areas where people make mistakes, or where they need a little bit more focus, because there are certain areas that you can focus in. For example, if you're dealing with a big partner, a big business, many times people go, oh, big business, I'm dealing with a big bank, I should just sign those terms and conditions. You're getting a loan or a personal guarantee. One of the things to think in those situations might be, okay, I can't really negotiate this agreement, but there may be, for example, if you're going to provide business to Oracle or Facebook or one of the big companies, you can't really negotiate a lot in there, but you could negotiate your payment terms, for example. And you could make sure that your limitation of liability is limited. You've limited your liability. If it doesn't have it, by the way, if it doesn't have a limitation of liability clause in the contract, it's not limited liability. You could be liable for everything. So there are some core little distinctions that you can take on board. That it doesn't mean you've got to negotiate everything down to the last wire. You're probably not going to be able to do that. But you can take these little points and these little principles, and sometimes that's just about a little bit of education, a little bit of understanding, a little bit of experience, a little bit of a wisdom from somebody who's done it before and worn the t-shirt and done the wrong thing usually. a friend who can share that. Other things like giving away shares. Another should. You should give away shares to your, right? You hear it a lot, right? You should give away shares. You should give away shares. Ask the people that are coming on board, do you want shares? Is that actually what you want? Because you'll find it's a remarkably complex thing to do. And of course, the guys that I deal with a lot of property investors who set up what are called special purpose acquisitions, so limited companies, and they give away shares for these things. It actually doesn't often make sense for them to give away shares. It's really complicated. It costs them a lot of money. They just do it because they've seen their mentor do it. Oh, he set up an SPV, I should set up an SPV. So there's some really very simple things that people can just, there are small distinctions. And a lot of these come down to my own philosophy. I'm sure any other lawyer would say, give them shares, no problem. But I actually have to ask the question, well, why? And a lot of it comes down to should. You should do that. If you find yourself shoulding all over yourself, as Anthony Robbins says, you want to get out of that mindset of the things you should do.
Yeah, we do. We are drowning in a world quite a lot of the time, aren't we, of shoulds in personal development space too, and and people respond to that, and a lot of people will act from that and make decisions, big decisions based on that.
And it's from a place of fear, right? It's from a place of fear. And when we act from a place of fear, often we're not making the right decision. I always say, and every time I speak, this seems to be the conversation that comes up. Use your common sense, and common sense isn't that common. Everybody that's doing the things they think they should do, ask yourself, why should I do that? What is it that actually, what is the benefit? What is the outcome that I want to achieve? And is it the best way of achieving that outcome? Because often it's just a way of achieving an outcome, and it can be a massively complex way of achieving an outcome. And therefore, complexity adds cost to whatever you're doing. Yeah. So, yeah.
I think in many instances, it's amazing the number of people that don't even do the outcome thinking. We talk about this on quite a lot of the Facebook lives, that people don't even, you ask them the question about, so actually, what's your outcome? And it's like you've just, told them that you are actually God. And they're like, oh, wow, really? Like, that's quite an important question to factor in. Actually, it's a real basic, but they don't do it.
And the first question that you ask about what's your outcome. So I might say to you, Richard, if you wanted to give people equity, okay, Richard, what do you want to do? And you might say, I want to give my staff equity. Actually, it's the next question, which is why, that actually determines the real reason. And it's digging deeper into that and not assuming. I can assure you, lawyers, actually, I would say lawyers are worse at this than any business owner. And that is, you dig a trench and you say, this is the way things have always been done. Therefore, that's what we need to do. And I guess it comes back to the kind of the change that we want to do and the shaking up that we want to achieve in this industry. Why do we need to do it that way? Why does it have to? Let's ask the question. So, yeah. Okay,
nice. I like the bit about the terms as well. I've never bothered negotiating on terms. I got a couple of big corporate clients that work on 90-day terms, and that's quite painful. But I've never bothered questioning it. So.
Yeah, and sometimes you can't, you're dealing with big boys and they don't want to deal, you're worth, even if you're in tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, you're not at the millions of pounds, and so they don't want to negotiate. But asking payment terms is a big one.
All they can say is no or yes.
Exactly. Or, hey, look, guys, we've had this relationship for a long period of time. Wouldn't it be great if? That would, it's a big win for you.
So tell me, what do you think are some of the real common mistakes that cost businesses their reputation, that cost them money? What are the big mistakes they're making?
I think investment. So I was saying giving away shares, thinking they should give away shares, definitely. Not negotiating, that's another one I really think causes a problem. Speaking. So speakers, I work with a lot of speakers and trainers. And what I find is they often, in the opposite way, so I say negotiate with people, they often negotiate with people or allow their sales staff, they don't train their sales staff enough to say no exceptions. So I see kind of these written exceptions at the bottom of it. I mean, these are just, some examples of situations that can go wrong, but that is a big one. Limitation and liability, big one. always make sure, and it's something that's overlooked because it's not something you will read, because if it's not in there, I guess I shared that earlier, if the wording limitation of liability is not in there, there is no limit to your liability. What does that mean? That means that if something were to go wrong, you have unlimited liability, infinite liability for what you have, for your part in it. I mean, it has to cause a loss, etc. But for big businesses, something you do could ultimately create a massive impact.
For sure.
Sometimes smaller businesses less likely, but certainly big businesses, that's going to create some sort of issue there. I think those are kind of the ones that come to mind, but also listening to the shoulds. That's a common mistake that people go.
And when the interesting bit about the exceptions and the bits that go at the kind of the bottom of a contract, and I think it's tough, isn't it? And when you set up a business, and there'll be lots of people in this group that are setting up business for the first time, and actually so hungry for work and hungry for opportunity, and want to be really pliable, and they'll do whatever it takes just to get the piece of work. They actually sacrifice their own stuff, and often they're dealing with it. And we get some in the group that will go, hang on, I've been stuffed over by this person who keeps cancelling work, and my terms and conditions aren't really that sturdy, but you kind of do it on good faith, and then they get completely stuffed over. So it requires a bit of, even more so in early days, a bit of bravery and some courage to say, this is what I work by, and these are the principles, and you can play ball with them if you want to.
Yeah, and it's really interesting that this is why I love speaking to you guys, because it all comes down to principles, and ultimately that is it. If you focus on, so what is law? What is the legal profession? In my mind, well, because the way that I work within business, what we do, you and I have a relationship. Whatever that relationship is, what we're doing is we're putting that into writing, and then we're saying, this is going to be bound in some way, so that if we look back at what that relationship was intended to be, we have a record of what it should be. That's what contract is, right? And most people relate law to contract. There are also certain things outside of us, so laws, regulations, that apply to us as I'm going to say social contract, because it's not strictly true. We live in this country, and therefore there are certain things that apply to us. We use the internet. There are certain things that apply to us. Therefore, there are rules and regulations to which we must comply. So they have compliance teams. And from my perspective, law is more than that. It's broader than that. You kind of alluded to that earlier. It's not about those just strict rules and regulations. It's broader. It's a concept of structure and putting structure and boundaries in place. So in a contract, I'm saying, you know what, Richard, I'm prepared to do this. You are prepared to do that. And we're binding ourselves to agreeing to that. That doesn't mean to say it can't change, by the way. Of course it can, just like conversations change, but it sets out a process by which that change then occurs. And so these are all really principles. What are we agreeing to in any legal relationship? We are agreeing to principles. And so two things that I'm going to share. I may even find a third, but the first thing is progress, not perfection. It is not about, especially when you're early doors. Look, I didn't have perfect T's and C's when I started out. I've brought things in based on issues that have arisen. If you can keep good records about issues that come up, then you can incorporate those at the next run. So I say, there's no such thing as there is definitely no such thing as a watertight agreement. There are just bigger contracts. There's bigger agreements and there's smaller agreements. And that's the difference between watertight and not watertight. And it's not just about the size of the agreement or you saying, I'm not going to take any risk. This is a relationship. This is two ways. This is between two people. And we enter into those social agreements day on day on day. So one thing that I find, I'm probably going off. So progress, not perfection. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
Right. Second thing is boundaries. The second thing that contracts, and it's not just contracts that I'm talking about here, but it just is a lot clearer, are setting boundaries. What you will do and what you won't do. Are you prepared to take a telephone call at 10 o'clock at night? Early doors, you probably are. I've certainly been there. But if you don't set the boundaries, somebody else will. And it will be the client that needs that help at 8 o'clock at night, and then it causes chaos and probably and doesn't pay. I mean, these are the sorts of worst case scenarios, and you're the one who's left reeling from, oh, what do we do here? So it's not about contract management, it's about relationship management. And that takes a lot of courage. That takes a lot of character. That takes a lot of change within ourselves to recognize those, I'm going to say, the weaknesses. I mean, they are weaknesses, or they're not our strengths. There's certain things that I'm very strong at. Saying no to somebody at 8 p.m. at night when they really need some help is not one of them. And so we have to set those boundaries, but it is progress, not perfection. And that's the same with all. It's the same with all relationships, right?
And it's values. It's value sets, isn't it? That's where we find this clash, because my values and your values, they're going to align on some things, and some things are going to go like this. And I think, again, we talk a lot about people really understanding what their values are and being able to build their business out from that. But that also, even before you get to a contract stage, as you say, just in that relationship stage, that plays a big part in us going, actually, where's my boundary? Where's my threshold point? Where am I prepared to go up to there? But beyond that, you go, it ain't happening. But it does, back to that bit, it does require some courage and some confidence to, in advance of it, stand your ground and not attempt to work out when you're in it. It's funny, the stuff we can normalize, isn't it? And we make it norm. We go, 8 o'clock's fine, and then 9 o'clock, well, it's not great, but it's okay. And suddenly you go from the client's perspective, or the other person in the relationship's perspective, they go, well, it's just how it is. It's not a problem, because if it was a problem, you'd have told me, right?
And actually, we don't do ourselves any favors. We don't do them favors either. It's like a child. I mean, it's not like a parent-child relationship, but sometimes it is. You have to set those boundaries, because it makes it easier for them, because they know then, okay, I mean, timing's a good example, but between 9 and 6, I can get that person. After that, actually, I don't. I mean, if you've got tenants in your property, having them call you about a dripping tap at 10 p.m. at night is not an ideal situation. So it's any type of relationship. And you also mentioned, so that was the third thing that I kind of scribbled down here. Good faith. And my one of the ladies, one of my colleagues, we were talking about this today in the social contract, and actually fairness, and the idea of the idea, it's not about when somebody moves over your boundaries, but actually giving good faith to people, but not allowing them to walk over you. And it's a tough line to tread. And I'm sure you've experienced this. I certainly have. Business is the best personal development that you can get, because the way that you deal with and show up to people that you're in service to, because you are in service to your customers and your clients, the way that you show up and you give that service has to be aligned to your values, but also has to be with some element of good faith. But you also have, there are other, you have to make some money out of it as well, and it has to be good business practice. And treading that line between the two, hard. As you say,
that's a great personal development tool. And when we had Christoph on at Christmas talking about setting intentions, and he said, businesses don't have problems. The issues that they're facing every day is a reflection of our own stuff, our own problems, our own inner issues that show up in our business environment. And actually, we're quick to go, oh, it's a business problem, but actually it requires us to do our own inner work, doesn't it?
People complicate everything. People
always,
are,
except
people
me.
I
don't.
I mean, me
very
neither.
simple.
I'm just there to unravel everything. No, I mean. It happens, doesn't it? It does happen.
It does. Okay, I've got a question for you from David. He says he's a 6+, I guess, on the risk scale, as opposed to being just 6 years old.
6 years old.
And his business partner is a 16+.
Ooh.
And how does he convince him of the value of paying for good legal advice up front?
Oh, that's a great question. You know what's interesting? Usually when I go and speak, I ask if there are any 16s in the room. They're quite a rare breed, because people either don't like to admit they're totally a 16, but great that he got a 16. And usually they're sat next to their wife or their partner, who is a 1 or a 3, like somewhere down there. Actually, David, that's a great companionship. It's probably why I assume that you've been in business for a while, but it's probably why you've had success in business so far, because you are, I've heard the phrase foil, like you complement each other very well. So having somebody who's a bit less risk averse and somebody who's less risk averse and somebody who's kind of throws caution to the wind, great. I would always say the word convince is probably suggests that there's a right and there's a wrong. Where I would probably go in the word is persuade. And persuasion takes a bit of training and a bit of understanding. I know we're going to do something later on in the year with you, Richard, and this may well be a tool. When we do this longer talk, there's a tool that can help to persuade him. We're going to go through a questionnaire, and I think that would be helpful because it gets him to see in black and white where some of the issues are. And what's important to him as a 16 is he will need to know exactly the cost to him, because he won't take any action unless it's really going to cost him something. He'll be quite happy to go with a risk unless, like you say, you convince him. But really what we want to do is allow him to come to the decision himself that there are certain areas, and it will be the areas of the highest risk. So my suggestion is you look at that. And if there are any particular areas that you are concerned with, then I'm happy to give you a couple of snippets around things you can say to him around the biggest losses.
Okay, cool. So there's a choices consequences piece, isn't there? How do we help someone see? And it all depends whether they are led by kind of logic or actually whether they're just very gut feel, maverick, shoot from the hip, as to how you get them to see an alternative. I love the spin on the word convince, because it becomes a bit my map, your map. And convince has I think the undertones a bit of I'm going to get you to see my view to the right place. So nice spin on that language about, because it has to be a dialogue, doesn't it? It has to be a partnership and a mutual understanding of that. We back to the values piece, that we come from different places. There isn't a right or wrong. There just is.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
There's the whole Stephen Covey nugget about seek first to understand and then to be understood.
Great.
And it's just a gem, isn't it? Because we spend a lot of our time doing it the other way around, where we seek to be understood and get our point of view across and tell them what we think, when actually we need to pedal back a bit and spend more time understanding where they're coming from and why that's important to them.
Yeah, and if you want to continue, this is always the question. It's like any partnership, any marriage, any relationship. If this is a relationship that you want to continue in, and that is an area that you can develop and you can work on, it sounds like it's a good focus point for you both to discuss and to work things through. And I probably would ask him the question whether he sees any risk in the business at all. It may be that you're in a totally risk-free business. Again, you might be thinking about all the things that you should be doing rather than actually the critical points that really needs the attention. So yeah, it might be worth having that discussion with him.
Okay, nice. Okay, so I'm really aware of time. We're at 8:40 and people will be wanting to go and watch Coronation Street on catch up and things. So give us your top tips that you think entrepreneurs should have awareness of and actually go and do right now. So we're kind of big drivers on action. We don't want to just fill up people's knowledge pots. We want to go, when this thing's over and once they've watched Coronation Street, what do they then need to go and do? What's the first step?
Okay, first thing I would say, and it relates back to the mistakes people make. One is look at your terms and conditions, and if there isn't a limitation and liability clause, then you will want to put something in, even if it just says, I have no liability. I'm sure we could share something with you if that's useful in terms of wording. Yeah. The second thing I would say is go back to your contracts with the big boys and see if there's anything that you can negotiate, if there's anything possible. And the third thing I would do is start looking, if you're starting to look at the equity side of things and people are like, oh, we need equity and we need to own, start looking at bonuses, start looking at other incentive programs and different ways of doing things, just to check them out, because there are other ways. And ask your staff, is this really what you want? It may be what they want, in which case, go ahead, gift away, but it may not be. So that's my 3 points.
All right, nice. So that whole piece about, I think probably for all of us, and I think what you said about the, terms and conditions need updating, and we need to keep checking in that they're not something we do when we set a business up and then put in a folder and leave, that we need to keep refining them. So I'm sure that's a good insight for all of us. Certainly is for me to go back and check my terms and conditions, because I don't think they've been tinkered with for a while and they probably need a bit of an upgrade too.
Great.
Right, you're brilliant. Thank you so much, Joe. So if people want to track you down and get in touch with you and ask you wonderful things and get some more of your time and energy, what's the best way to track you down?
I think email is the best way. So I will get Kelly to
We'll pop that in.
that. Yeah, pop that somewhere on the website. Happy to answer questions by email. Not too many. Not too many.
Not after 6 o'clock in the evening as well, folks.
As you can see, I don't work past 8.
That's a big fireplace you've got at home there.
Do you like it? Yeah, this
mirror. Yeah, it's amazing. I'm glad the business is doing so well. And you can track Joe down in the BTFI group. If you're not in the BTFI group, we'll pop the link in there too, full of loads of movers and shakers and game changers and disruptors.
And some great videos. I've been loving your videos, Richard.
Some really good videos in there. There's some good people in there with a lot to give. And if you want some tough love and some support and some cheerleaders and a arse kick, then come and join us. We're a merry band. At some point, Joe and I are going to do a webinar. It's going to be more Joe than me. I'll be there supporting from the sides and cheering her on.
Well, I tell you what you're going to do, Richard. You're actually going to walk through. I'm going to make you do that. I'm going to make you do the questionnaire yourself. So we're going to walk through a questionnaire at that point.
Questionnaires.
Yeah. We're going to get you. I'm going to get you thinking about your business and your T's and C's. If you haven't done it before, then.
Okay, great. Well, Kelly's really looking forward to joining you on that. So I'm busy that day, unfortunately, but Kelly will definitely be there. No, seriously, great. That's good. And we are going to get a date. We're going to do a deep dive webinar, health check, and we'll put that out to people when we're going to do that over the next month or so. So if you've been watching on Catch Up, you can still put questions in, ask questions of Joe, ask questions of me. We'll get back to you with responses. Joe Rogers, thank you very much. You're going home now, I hope.
I'm going home. Good night, guys.
Get home safely. Thank you again for joining us. And thanks, folks, for tuning in. We'll see you again next week at 8 o'clock. Over and out. Stay safe. Bye.